So the daf for today is daf Dalit. We left off yesterday at the very end of daf Gimel Amud Bet, what says Taima. So as Rabbi Smith says, so the shir should be a panacea. It should be right. It should bring before Shema for all need and Yeshua for our people in Israel and in Ukraine. And okay, so we'll get started then. So the discussion that we were having again. So we're having. Just make sure here. Okay. So again, like this is a little bit last minute, so I'm probably just gonna read along the English with the Hebrew and Aramaic, and then if you have any questions in the way, just feel free to interrupt. Okay, so here we go. Taima Chatav Rahmana Aleya. Okay, so we're trying to understand again. We had this verse about how you cannot marry two sisters while they're both alive, right? But at a later stage, if the sister you're married to passed away, you would be allowed to marry the other sister. But there seems to be this extra word there, aleya. Ha lav achi hava amina achot isha miyabemet my taima damrinan ati ase v'dachi lo tase. Up until this point, the Gemara has cited the brisa that interprets the biblical basis for the halacha of the Mishnah. The Gemara further analyzes the foundational principle of this topic. The reason that these women are exempt from levirate marriage is that the merciful one writes, quote, with her, from which it may be inferred that if it was not so, I would say that a wife's sister enters into levirate marriage with her sister's husband. What is the reason that one would have assumed that this is the case? Right? Just so this extra word aleya helps them understand that this would not be allowed. But there's something deeper here. So as we say in accordance with the principle that a positive mitzvah comes and overrides a prohibition. Right? It's a famous saying, in this case, a positive mitzvah to enter levirate marriage overrides the prohibition against marrying one wife's sister. Right? So you would think that would be enough. Right? This is a principle that comes up a lot. Comes up, for example, on with regarding metzora and a bris. Right? So you're not allowed to cut off part of the skin that has saras. That's a clear lotase. Or I guess just Shabbos and a bris. Right? You're not allowed to make cuts on Shabbos, but if you have a bris, so the 8th day falls on Shabbos, you have the bris. You're allowed to cut off the saras if you need to make a bris.
So how would this occur? Two brothers marry two sisters?
Yeah.
Wife's marrying one's wife's sister.
Yeah.
It have to be two brothers and two sisters. Right?
Yeah. So that we're saying we have this idea of aset lo dochelot aseh, right? So you would think that okay, maybe it should be allowed, right? Amar damrinan ate ase v'dachi lo tase greda. Lo tase sheyesh bo kares midachi. So lo tase greda minal dachi. Again, so we're going to analyze this principle of ase lo chedot aseh, that a positive mitzvah can overcome a lot aseh. So it's again, like it's going to be a big discussion. It's one of the main places in Talmud that talks about it. So the Gemara asks if that principle is applicable in this case. One can say that we said that a positive mitzvah comes and overrides a prohibition only when there is a prohibition for which one is punished by lashes alone. However, with regard to a prohibition that includes the punishments of kares, does a positive mitzvah override it? So like a more serious prohibition that has karis, right? That karis means spiritual, being cut off spiritually, right? Would it still apply? This prohibition is more severe than a regular one, and therefore perhaps the positive mitzvah does not override it. And furthermore, with regard to a prohibition for which one is punished by lashes alone, from where do we derive that a positive mitzvah overrides it? Okay, so again, we're trying to understand this principle of asel lo taseh. Dichtiv lo tilbash shatnez, gedilim taseh lecha. Okay, so one very strong example about asel lo taseh has to do with tzitzis. We have a prohibition of shatnez, means you can't mix wool and linen together. But on tzitzis, you are allowed to use wool and linen together. Okay, as it is written, you shall not wear diverse kinds of wool and linen together. You shall make for yourself, and then it says also, you shall make for yourself twisted fringes. So these verses come one right after the other. Okay, so that's on the four corner. So now here we have like how the pasuk ends. It says on the four corners of your covering with which you cover yourself. Right. These verses teach that despite the prohibition against wearing diverse kinds of wool and linen, it is permitted to prepare ritual fringes, right, of diverse kinds. Right. For example, the sky blue dyed threads of wool on linen garments. This shows that the positive mitzvah of ritual fringes overrides the prohibition of diverse kinds. Right, diverse kinds meaning kilayim. Ve'amar Rabbi Elazar smuchim min Torah minayin, shenemar smuchim la'ad le'olam asuin be'emet be'ashar. So here, this case is a little bit different because it's smuchim. Smuchim means the one, like I said, like one verse comes right after the other. So you learn out from there. Rabbi Elazar said, from where in the Torah is it derived that one may draw homiletical interpretations from the juxtaposition of verses? In other words, from where is it derived that the fact that certain verses are adjacent one to the other is a reason to apply the halachot from one verse to the other? As it is stated, the works of his hands in truth and justice, all his commandments are sure, just opposed forever and ever, made in truth and uprightness. Okay, again, so this is more like an asmachta, right? A hint to this idea. There's a verse in Tehillim, 101, Kaf Yud Aleph, Smuchim la'ad le'olam asuim be'emet ve'yashar. Okay, so just the smuchim, just opposed forever and ever, right? Made in truth and uprightness. This verse indicates that it is appropriate to draw inferences from juxtaposition of God's commandments. Ve'amar Rav Sheshes, Amar Rav Elazar, Mishum Rav Elazar ben Azariah, Minayin le'ibama shenafla lifnei mokesh chin shein chos minotam, shene'amar lo tachsom shor pidisho usmich le ki yeshu achim yachdav. So now we're going to learn another juxtaposition. And this juxtaposition says, and similarly, Rav Sheshet said that Rabbi Elazar said in the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. From where is it derived? From, with regard to the Yevama who came before a Yavam, afflicted with boils, that one may not mazal harm, and we cannot, basically not allow her to make an argument that she should not get married to this person. We don't quiet her. She cannot be forced into a levirate marriage, and he is compelled to release her by halitza. As it is stated, he shall not muzzle ox while it treads out the corn. And just opposed to it, it says, if brothers dwell together. So these verses, there's another disposition here, where the verse about the levirate marriage comes right after this verse about not being able to muzzle an ox. So we learn also here that you can't withhold her argument for not wanting to be married to a person that has all these skin issues. I just suppose, right, so which begins this passage that deals with the halachot of levirate marriage. This teaches that just as it is prohibited to muzzle the ox, so too one may not muzzle and ignore the complaints of a Yavama who does not wish to marry a Yavam afflicted with boils. Okay, so there's one idea also. We're talking about aseh dochalot aseh. So why don't we learn the halacha? Tosfot asks this. why don't we learn this idea from levirate marriage itself? Levirate marriage is a perfect example of an aseh lo aseh in the Torah. So why don't we just learn that whole principle from levirate marriage itself? So there's a whole discussion about this. One idea is that the difference is what they're supposed to say, that levirate marriage by very definition applies in every case, right? So the mitzvah of levirate marriage itself is about a prohibition that's not permitted. But what about cases like we were talking about before with tzitzis or with bris milah? So in some cases yes, in some cases no. Bris is not always on Shabbos, right? So in those kind of situations, you would think that it's a different scenario. So then the Rishonim, the Rosh Hashanah discuss, okay, what does this mean then in terms of Dchuya and Hutra? Like on Shabbos, Pikuach Nefesh on Shabbos. Does it mean that the mitzvah of Shabbos never applied when it came to Pikuach Nefesh? Did like similar to this law, did the mitzvah of levirate marriage, for example, never apply? The mitzvah of not marrying somebody your brother's wife never ever apply to a case where the brother doesn't have children, or is it just pushing it off? So for example, Shabbos, if it's just pushing it off, then you still try your best to keep all other Shabbos, even though you're saving a life. Or is it no? It's complete. It doesn't apply at all. You can do whatever it takes. So there's a lot of significance to that too.
I think one of the practical places this question comes up is when a widow says, I don't want to marry my brother, and I'm not interested in marrying anybody. So I don't want to do yibum, and I don't want to do chalitza.
Right.
Go away.
Right. Yeah.
That's practical. I think.
Yeah.
I was going to say something.
Huh?
I was going to say.
He's just going to say the same thing.
Yeah. See what happens. She could do neither.
Well,
it
really depends. I think on her own.
So
because there's a tshuva from the Psalm Sofer that she has to do.
Has to do.
It came up in this community. I don't want to marry him. I don't want to marry anybody.
So Rav Naftali is saying here that but first to ask, is that the like halacha today, right? In terms of whether the widow. Okay.
You have to ask Rabbi Smith.
Okay, right after Rabbi Smith, but so the Chassam Sofer has a tshuva that. Sorry, what did you say that she have to ask her if she wants to?
And the reason that it has to be done is that there's some discussion in Zohar that there's a metaphysical relationship created between a widow and her brother-in-law, whether or not she likes it.
I mean,
Yeah.
That's
I don't know what you had for breakfast.
Yeah. So kabbalistically, kabbalistically, there's a connection. The connection, that, as far as I know, is that the soul of the deceased brother comes down into the baby of the levirate marriage. So that's one idea. But one other thing in general, that in terms of in land of Israel, there was a discussion where Rabbi Herzog and other Gedolim made a takana that in Israel there was going to be a law that applies throughout, that is always going to be chalitza and not yibum, right? Oh yeah, and that's the idea of the idea of Abba Shaul that we mentioned last time, that if you don't have the right kavana, then you wouldn't do it. And then Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, who was much younger at the time, he has a tshuva where he's basically quoting everybody and including the Shulchan Aruch, that no, where he's saying for Sephardim that you would be allowed to do yibum, and he actually himself martyred a case like a Yemenite situation where yibum did take place in Eretz Israel. So that's kind of very, very interesting. Also,
You remain so small.
no, I just heard a shir right before this class from Rabbi I guess Rosenfeld. No, I guess I'll get back to you on the name. Okay, there you go. Okay, so here we go. We'll keep going. So where it says Amar Rav Yosef. Amar Rav Yosef Afil. Oh, sorry, Rabbi Shalom Rosner is a YU rabbi reads. Okay. Amar Rav Yosef Afilu leman de lo darish smuchim be'alma the Mishnah Torah darish. Ha Rabbi Yehuda be'alma lo darish, but Mishnah Torah darish. Okay, so here we have something very, very interesting. That there are some people that learn laws that are connected one to the other, that are one follow that are just opposed. One opinion is that you can learn these juxtapositions throughout the entire Torah, and another opinion is that you don't. Only for Sefer Devarim would you learn one juxtaposition. So that's a very interesting question. Right, so I'll just read it in English. The Rav Yosef said, even according to the one who does not generally derive Hamatic interpretations from juxtaposed verses, nevertheless he does derive them from Deuteronomy, as Rabbi Yehuda does not generally derive Hamatic interpretations from juxtaposed verses, and yet he does derive them from Deuteronomy. So what's the difference between Deuteronomy and the rest of the Torah? So we know that the style is actually quite different in the Torah. Why is that? Because the first four books were directly, right? How you say, like Moshe was just like transcribing it. Right? There was no interaction, let's say, between Hashem and Moshe as it's being written. It's clear, just simply the word of Hashem written down. With Devarim, it says that the Shekhinah spoke, right, Grono Shel Moshe, from his throat. So the Moshe wasn't more involved, so to speak, in the revelation of it. And it's interesting because then Mishnah Torah becomes this kind of Sefer Devarim becomes this kind of in between the Torah and the rest of the Tanakh. Right. So it's that's also kind of a very interesting other idea. But so
Saying you don't learn from
the first four.
You don't learn from.
No, that's it. Yeah, you learn from the other ones. You don't learn, but in the Devarim you do learn. And but there's one way of understanding it also. Like one of the main ideas also is that the first, how was the Torah given? That's a very basic question, right? So there's two opinions. One is that Stuma, and the other one is Megillah. One idea is that it was given all at up at Har Sinai up until, I guess, Parsha Balak or something like that. East, right? So there are a few, and then the rest was given all the way at the end, right before Moshe passed away, right, when he wrote down the whole Sefer Devarim and everything. Another idea is that it was given. Yes, there was all at Har Sinai, and then scroll by scroll it was given out over the period, and then right, and that would also explain a little bit more why Devarim was different. So basically, you have, if it was Megillah, then you wouldn't learn out, except for Devarim, because Devarim we know was given all at once, Moshe's last day. So that's the thing. Do you look at it as like a complete whole, which most of us do, or do you look at it as scrolls being written down at different times, right? Yeah.
I was surprised you didn't talk about the Lama Tes Malachos, because that's
right.
a big example of where we learn from connection.
Right. So yeah. So
all the Malachos of Shabbos we learn from the pasuk that's next to it.
right. Yeah. So yeah, Ramatali is saying the in Shabbos also it's like we learn from one for the other, where we learn the Malachos right from in Vayakel. Okay. All right. So let's keep going. So now we have this idea. We know that Rabbi Yehuda is the one that learns from Devarim, but not from the rest of the Torah. Everybody else, most people learn these connections, juxtapositions from the whole Torah. Okay, so it says Uve Alma Minalan de Lodarish. how do we know this? The Tanya ben Azai Omer Nemar Mechashefa Lo Tchaye Benemar Kol Shochev in Behema Mos Yumas Samchu Inyan Lo Mash Shochev in Behema Biskila Af Mechashefa Biskila. The Gemara asks, and from where do we derive that Rabbi Yehuda generally does not derive Hamalatic interpretations from juxtaposed verses, as it is taught in a brisa with regard to the punishment of a sorceress? The Ben Azai says that it is stated, "You shall not allow a sorceress to live." Although the manner of the execution is not specified, as it is stated, "Whoever lies with a beast shall be put to death." The Torah juxtaposed this manner to that, so as to say, just as one who lies with a beast is executed by stoning, so too a sorceress is executed by stoning. Okay, so this is a juxtaposition that is not in the Varim. Okay. Amar lo Rabbi Yehuda, v'chi mipnei shesamchu inyan lo tzizeh l'skila. Rabbi Yehuda interjects in this discussion and says, with regard to this proof, Rabbi Yehuda said to Ben Azai, and simply due to the fact that the Torah just exposed this manner to that one, shall we take this person out to be stoned? Should he be sentenced to the most severe of the death penalties on the basis of a juxtaposition of passages? Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda is not agreeing with learning out juxtaposition that's not in the Var. No, there's a different way of learning it from Ovidoni. Ovidoni is also a kind of witchcraft, right? Wizardry. Belama yatsu lehakish lahem. Beloma lecha ma Ovidoni biskila af nechashefa biskila. Rather, Rabbi Yehuda claims that the source is the following statement: mediums and wizards were included among all sorcerers. And why were they singled out from the rest of the verse? And a man or a woman whom is a medium or a wizard shall surely be put to death. They shall stone them with stones, their blood is upon them. It is to draw an analogy to them and to say to you, just as a medium wizard are executed by stoning, so too a sorceress is executed by stoning. This shows that Rabbi Yehuda does not derive Hamalatic interpretations from juxtaposed verses. Let's hear.
Whoa.
So gesund. Mishnah Torah minalan de darish. Ditnan nose Adam anusat aviv meputach aviv anusat bno meputach bno. Rabbi Yehuda also anusat aviv meputach aviv. Okay, so how do we know that Rabbi Yehuda does hold by juxtaposition when it comes to Deuteronomy? So you have this verse that says, as we learned in the Mishnah, a person may wed a woman raped by his father and once seduced by his father, by his father, despite the fact that his father's wife is forbidden to him. Similarly, he may marry a woman raped by his son and once seduced by his son. Not recommended here. You're saying it's not an Isser. Although in one is prohibited by Torah law from marrying the wife of his father or wife of his son, these prohibitions do not apply to a woman raped or seduced by them. And Rabbi Yehuda prohibits him from marrying a woman raped by his father and a woman seduced by his father. Okay, so the Amar Rav Gidol Amar Rav, my time with Rabbi Yehuda, how do we know that Rabbi Yehuda, what's his source for forbidding this? Dichsiv lo yikach ish et eshet aviv velo yigale knaf aviv. Knaf shara aviv lo yigale. So Rabbi Yehuda brings these verses that say what is written: a man shall not take his father's wife and shall not uncover his father's skirt, and that is in Deuteronomy 23:1. The latter expression, and shall not uncover his father's skirt, is referring to a skirt that has been seen by his father, but it's not just an actual marriage. And any woman who has had a relationship with his father may not be uncovered by his son, meaning his son may not marry her. Memai devanusa tiv me'ilav be'dikra dichtiv natan ha'ish ashochev ima le'avi anara hamishin kasef u'semich lei lo'ikach ish gomre. And from where is it known that the verse is written with regard to a woman raped by his father? It's from the previous verse, again, juxtaposition, which deals with halachos of rape, as is written, and the man who lay with her must give her give the maiden's father 50 shekels of silver. And just opposed to it is the verse, a man shall not take his father's wife and shall not uncover his father's skirt. This shows that Rabbi Yehuda does derive homiletic interpretations from just opposed verses in Deuteronomy. Okay, so there's an interesting idea from Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky also about why are these things in Deuteronomy at all. Deuteronomy is all about laws that apply to the public, the tzibur, kings. Now, when you inherit land of Israel, what are the laws of marriage doing there? So the answer he gives is that marriage is very much something that is a public occurrence. For example, we don't say tachanun when a chassan walks into a minyan. So there used to be a time where there was a request that chassanim should not come to the minyan on Mondays and Thursdays, so that we would be able to say tachanun then. Oh, nowadays, look at the opposite. Yeah. 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 I'm saying, but to specifically have, so that those longer tachanun could be said, right? So people were trying to, to evaluate it. So anyway, but what's the idea? Again, this idea that the Judaism, there's certain events in life, like high points and low points, become a public event where you get married. You don't go off your honeymoon right away, right? That's the idea. You have Sheva Brachos where you invite the community, right? The idea of having new faces come to the Sheva Brachos. Also with Shiva, the same thing, right? It's not personal. It's not to mourn alone. They're supposed to it becomes a community thing.
Also chalitza.
Chalitza.
It's a community event because you need a minyan.
Yeah, so chalitza also. It's a community event. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right, yeah. So Rabbi Naftali is piling up the trophies here. All right, Baruch Hashem.
Ever.
Okay. Rabbanan I havdi samichle the kamart hashta de lo samichle. So okay, now we explain Rabbi Yehuda that learns out this juxtaposition. Now we have to explain the rabbi's opinion. The Gemara asks, and how do the rabbis who disagree with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda respond to this argument? They say the two verses were fully juxtaposed. It would be interpreted as you said. However, now that it is not properly juxtaposed, as written, a man shall not take his father's wife, in between the halachas of rape and the pronouncement with regard to uncovering one's father's garment, this serves to break the juxtaposition. So it's not there's a break. It's not exactly one right next to the other. Okay. Right. So then it says Bishomeres Yava Makatuv Mendaber Belavor Alav Bishne Lavin. Consequently, this particular verse concerning the uncovering of one's father's garment is speaking of a woman waiting for her Yava. Okay, so in the case of one's father, in other words, the Yevama of a father who is waiting for levirate marriage to the father is already considered his father's skirt, and she is therefore forbidden to the son. Okay, so the rabbis are understanding this verse about the knaf, about the skirt, not to be about anyone the father had a relationship with. It's talking about specifically the case of a Yevama, a woman who is waiting to receive a levirate marriage or chalitza from the father. That's who the son is not allowed to marry.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I must have been out at the time, but why is it that Yibum is no longer widely practiced?
Oh, yeah. So we're talking about that there's a takana that because one of the things of Abba Shaul was that if you don't have the proper kavana, okay. If you don't have the proper kavana, then we don't do it. So then, okay. But okay. So,
That was Dr. Sen's half decent comment.
Yeah.
Half decent comment. He made a comment about somebody being half decent.
If like your previous spouse passes away, you'll get if your other spouse passes away, what's somebody's married? Oh, right. That.
yeah. So Ramaptas also there's additional complications that people don't. Yeah, we don't have to. We don't marry two women, and that's the law of most countries. Also, takanas of Rabbeinu Gershom, which the Yemenites, right, in the case we're talking about Rabbi Avadia, I've said before, don't follow. I guess, yeah. So I think that's also was part of it. Okay. Okay, so then I'll just keep reading here. In other words, the Yevama of a father who is waiting for levirate marriage, the father is already considered to quote his father's skirt, and she is therefore forbidden to the son. Although this woman who is awaiting levirate marriage is in fact his uncle's wife and explicitly prohibited to him in any case, this passage comes to teach that he violates two prohibitions. In other words, were he to engage in relations with her, he would be penalized both for relations with his uncle's wife, relations with his father's skirt. Okay, so that's the rabbi's opinion as to not learning out that previous law about somebody the father had relations with but wasn't married to. Okay, with a Mishnah Torah, my time of the Darish. Okay, so now we have to understand why does Rabbi Yehuda not learn out in general, but he does learn out from Deuteronomy. Okay, so again, but it's actually talking about this specific case in Deuteronomy that Rabbi Yehuda learns from, not the general questions. The Gemara responds, if you wish, say it is because it's evident from the context. If you wish, say it's because the verse is extraneous and therefore free for this inference. Again, the idea is mucha. Mucha has to do, it's like shown, it's in that particular place. And that's the issue. And that's why you can learn the juxtaposition. And the other one is mufne. Mufne comes from the word pnai, right? Free. You already know this halacha from somewhere else. So why is the Torah mentioning it again? Or it must be because it's free for you to interpret something else from it. Okay, so those are the two ideas behind the juxtaposition. Again, the place where it's located and the fact and the addition that this halacha has already been learned somewhere else. Okay, the Gemara elaborates. If you wish, say this because it is evident, right? Mucha, as if it is so, and the verse not intend to teach by juxtaposition that the merciful one, right, this halacha prohibited marriage to a father's wife alongside the other women with whom relations are forbidden in Leviticus, right? That's where most of the laws about this are. We read this on Yom Kippur, right? Acharei Mas. Okay, since the verse is out of place, it's certainly coming to teach by way of juxtaposition. And if you wish, say instead that it is because this verse is free, as if it is so that the verse is not coming to teach an additional halacha, that the merciful one right only a man shall not take his father's wife. Why do we need the phrase and shall not uncover his father's skirt? This phrase is superfluous and therefore it teaches by juxtaposition. Okay, so those are the two ideas of how you learn juxtaposition. Yes, now Daf Dalet Amud Beis. Shma mina le'afnuye. We learn from this that this phrase is free to teach an additional halacha. Okay, so now we're moving on to tzitzit. Begabe tzitzit nami ibayis ema mishum demuchach ibayis ema mishum demufne. Okay, with regard to ritual fringes, tzitzit as well, there is a particular reason to derive a homiletical interpretation from the juxtaposition of the verses. If you wish, say it is because it is evident from the context, and if you wish, say instead that it is because this verse is free for this inference. Let's first see the context. The im can lichtivei rachmana abe parashat tzitzis. Right, we have a whole parsha. We're saying the Shema, right? The parsha of tzitzis. How come there's this idea of gilim tasu? It's talking about tzitzis. One is talking about kilayim, right? Not mixing wool and linen. Lemay ilchasak ksabeyacha. Bebayis ema mishum demufne. Or say it's free verse. Michdi katav beged kilayim shatnis lo yale Allah alecha. Right? It's already written. Right? why do you have lo tilba shatnes lamali? There's a double language there, where at first it says that you shouldn't wear kilayim, you shouldn't have it upon yourself, and it also says don't wear shatnes lamali. Yeah, shamina lefnu.
There's an exception that says something can be
Right. Yeah. So that's the idea. So how do we know? We have this exception that systems can be shatnes. How do we know that? Because it's juxtaposed. Right? It says first wool. It talks about not mixing wool and linen, and then right after it says should have cistus. So we learned that juxtaposition. But what does it mean, a juxtaposition? It's not so simple as just because they're next to each other. There has to be more to it. One is that, you're putting it here, juxtaposed. It doesn't belong here at all. There's another part that talks about it. Another idea is that we already know the laws. This law about shatnez, we already know. Why are you repeating it? So it's a free verse that we can use to interpret. So then I'll read it in English also. The Gemara elaborates, if you wish, it is because it is evident, muchach, as if it is so that no inference should be drawn from adjacent verses, let the merciful one write this verse by the portion of ritual fringes, right, which is in Numbers chapter 15. With regard to what halacha did the Torah write here, clearly the Torah is teaching halacha from the adjacent verses. And if you wish, say it is because this verse is free, since the Torah has already written, quote, neither shall there come upon you a garment of diverse kinds mingled together. Why then do I need the verse, quote, you shall not wear diverse kinds, kilayim, wool and linen together? Learn from this that the verse is free for derivation of a homiletic interpretation from just supposed verses. Again, these two ideas. One is that it's in the wrong place, and one is that we already know it, this law. Okay. Hani mitzayit. We're gonna say no, it's not so simple. You do need to have these two expressions, right? Again, one expression is lo ya'aleh alecha, it should not be upon you, kilayim. Well, another one is don't wear it. Why do you need both? Di katav rachmana lo ya'alecha havamina kol derech ala asur rachmana v'afilo mochrim ksus sa rachmana lo tilba shatnes avil mochrim ksus sa rachmana lo tilba shatnes dume dilevisha deis beyana. What's the difference? It's a big difference. If it said only don't put it upon you, you would think that whatever way you put it on you would be prohibited. The fact that it says later don't wear it means that only when you put it upon you and you're deriving benefit from it. Meaning, so a person who's selling a suit, okay, would be in the category of the first one where he's not getting benefit from, which is kind of interesting idea. What do you mean he's not getting benefit? He's selling the suit, but I guess it's not a direct benefit. He's not benefiting from having the clothes on his skin. He's just, right? That's his business. Okay, I'm going to read it in English also. The Gemara rejects this explanation. Both of these verses are necessary, as had the merciful one written only, quote, neither shall there come upon you. I would say that the merciful one prohibits every manner by which a garment of diverse kinds comes upon you, and this applies even to sellers of covering. Who do not wear the garment, but merely rest them on their shoulders. I guess it's like a typical image of the tailor, right? Somebody with the cloth on the shoulder. Therefore, the merciful one writes, "You shall not wear diverse kinds." Teach that the prohibition applies only in cases similar to wearing, which provides benefit and does not simply involve placing the covering upon oneself. Which is very interesting, this idea that kavana, that the hana tzricha kavana, right? That somehow having benefit has to do with your intention. I didn't. Usually, you think the other way. You have that's an idea by eating fat. Right? The problem with eating non-kosher is that I didn't mean to eat non-kosher. Well, you derive benefit. You enjoy that steak, right? So like now it's a problem after tshuva. I said so. But it's interesting here that when it comes to shatnez, I guess it's a little bit less intense of a feeling that the fact that you don't have it, you're not thinking about enjoyment, that's enough of not considering a hana. I think there's a discussion in the very interesting. Ve'ikatav Rahmana lot tilbas hava mina. Okay, what about the other verse? What if you only had one, not the other? Dafka levisha the nafish hanaisa about halala tav Rahmana lo yalecha. If it was the other way around, if it just said don't wear it, you would think that it would. If you let me just I'll read it in English first. And had a merciful one written only, you shall not wear. I would say this means specifically wearing, which provides significant benefit, both warmth and adornment. But merely placing a garment of diverse kinds upon oneself is not prohibited, even if one is warmed by the clothing. Therefore, the merciful one writes, neither shall there come upon you. Okay, so this is why you need both verses. Okay, so since we said that both were necessary, the wearing part and the putting it upon you, so then now it's saying, okay, so maybe that's not what's extra. Maybe it's just part of the verse that's extra. The part you could have just said lotzil bashatnis. Why do you have to have this thing about saying also semi-efficient, like specifying that it means wool and linen? The Gemara challenges if in any case part of the verse is superfluous, as if so, the merciful one write only, you shall not wear their various kinds. Why do I need the addition of wool and linen? The definition of the various kinds is clothing is already known from another source. Okay. Michdi. Is that really michdi usually means like, is that really the case? Do you really? All right, so we have this verse. The Rabbi Shmuel, the house of Rabbi Shmuel says, "Hoil b'nimru b'Torah stam begadim ufrat lecha akatuv bechad mehen semeru fishtim af kol semeru fishtim b'chadav rachaman lamali shamina lehafnuye." Okay, so here I guess the question is, don't we know it's semeru fishtim? Let's see. How so? Since it is written, neither shall there come upon a garment of diverse kinds mingled together, right? That's the idea of kilayim. The school of Rabbi Shmuel taught, since the word garments is stated in the Torah unmodified, thus stating from what materials those garments were made, the verse specified in one of its reference to garments the content of the halacha of ritual and purity of leprosy, a wool garment or linen garment. The following conclusion can be drawn. Okay, so in different places, when it talks about Metzora, we know that garment, begadim, means wool and linen. Just as when the Torah mentions the garment in the case of leprosy, it's referring to one made of wool and linen. So too, all garments mentioned in the Torah are those made from wool and linen. Other fabrics are not classified as those used for garments, right?
Well, it says here, Rabbi Ishmael says, like, there are the two verses, like, you should not wear shanis and it should not come upon you. It says here that you should not wear it or be covered. That's what it means, like those two things.
Right.
I guess, like, not just like attire or anything, but also like a blanket or something.
Yeah.
At least that's what I'm getting.
You know where this comes up practically, where you have naked persistence, it's not made of wool or linen. Question.
Question of whether it's. Oh, that's why Chabad is very strict. They're pretty strict about specifically wool and linen.
This was a kind of a well-known clapus between Rabbi Feinstein and definitely well-known
Oh.
This particular issue. I mean, argument, this discussion, the same as mine.
But Masali is talking about how if there's a machloket on whether or not having a sisters that's not wool and linen. The beged, if it's not wool and linen, if there's a problem, if that would be considered sisters. So Rabbi Moshe Feinstein would say yes, and right, I guess so. I don't know. But in Chabad, Chabad, we tried to use sisters that have wool and linen.
What happens if the sisters become compulsory and you don't know it?
Yeah, I think so. Dr. Stein is asking, are you over shotness when you're wearing, if the sisters become possible? Yeah, I would think so. Yeah. But one of the discussions here is just if the Gemara just asked, why do we need to? By the way, I can't really see the clock, so if you'll let me know.
It's 6:10.
Okay. All right.
About 10 to
It's 6:20.
6:10.
6:20.
Oh, wait.
6:20.
6:20. Okay, so just okay, I'll try to wrap up here. But the question of the Gemara was, why do we have to specify wool and linen? That seems to be extra. Rabbi Shmuel is saying, and that's kind of point, but Rabbi Shmuel is saying that if you just said kilayim, you would think it would be all clothes you can't mix together. Every time you wear clothes, you can only have only cotton, only wool, right? Only flax, whatever. So how do we know that it's only wool and linen? So Rabbi Shmuel is saying, just like by the Metzora, it says wool and linen. So we know when it says the word garment, so that's how we know that. So it really is extra. Should we stop here then?
No,
keep
rolling,
going.
baby.
Okay.
Keep rolling.
All right, let's keep going.
Where are you going? Where are you going?
Okay, va'akati itzrich salka daitach amina halahi delo nafesh hanata about levisha the nafesh hanata called tremine asa rahmana hata rahmana semer pishta. The Gemara raises a difficulty, but the verse is still necessary, as it could enter your mind to say that it is referring only to placing a garment on oneself, which does not provide a great benefit. However, with regard to the actual wearing of a garment, which entails great benefit, the merciful one prohibits wearing any two types of garment. Therefore, the merciful one writes wool and linen with regard to wearing garments of diverse kinds as well. Okay, so again, like there could be, even though we were just talking about, it could be applied to every garment. It could be an issue regarding wearing as opposed to just having it on you. Well, but again, you could just not say anything and you could learn it out. The Gemara responds, if so, let the verse be silent and refrain from mentioning wool and linen at all. And the halacha that only wearing wool and linen together is prohibited can be derived by the means of a verbal analogy between the terms diverse kinds and diverse kinds from placing a covering of diverse kinds upon oneself. Right? If you already have it in one place, you could just learn right, a gzera shava, which is a complicated thing to say because you just don't learn a gzera shava. Gzera shava is a tradition that's being brought down. But the Miri is the one that asked this question. The repetition of wool and linen must be coming to teach that one should derive a homiletics interpretation from these juxtaposed verses. But the Rabbi Shmuel, Tama de Chatav Rahman Semer Fishtim, Halav Achi Kilayim Tzitzitz Hava Mina, Desa Rahmana, V'Aksiv V'Asulam Tzitzitz Al Kanfei B'Dehem. The Gemara asks, and according to that which the school of Rabbi Shmuel taught, the mention of wool and linen is superfluous and teaches that they are not prohibited in the case of ritual fringes. The reason is that the merciful one specifically writes wool and linen. From here, it may be inferred that if it were not so, I would say that the merciful one prohibits a mixture of the reverse kinds and ritual fringes. Can it be considered that this is the case? But isn't it written that they make themselves fringes on the corners of the garments? V'tana devei Ishmael called the gadim semer fishtim hem v'marachmana avid lake tcheles amrahu u'may tcheles amrahu the sheish kitana tcheles amrahu. Okay, so that we kind of established that the begadim means wool and linen. How do we know that tzitzis means wool? Right, so we also will learn it out. So we'll finish with this. And the school of Rabbi Shmuel taught all garments mentioned in the Torah are wool or linen. The merciful one says, with regard to ritual fringes, prepare it and a sky blue dye. The sky blue dye thread is prepared from wool. Okay, I didn't know that. To have a sky blue dye, it has to be from wool. The Torah explicitly commands that at least one woolen thread of sky blue dye must be tied even on a linen cloth, which proves that diverse kinds are permitted in the context of ritual fringes. Gemara establishes the previous claim, and from where it's derived that the sky blue thread is made of wool? From the fact that the Torah specifies that one of the strands of the priestly garments was made of shesh, which means linen. This indicates that the other threads, including the sky blue thread, are from wool. Okay, so I guess we'll stop here.
Thank you, Daniel.
All right,
Okay, Daniel, very well.
And,
Oh, then
will you
don't,
be
sir.
here on Sunday?
Then don't, sir.
Done.
Sunday
Don't
morning?
do it.
Well,
Are
okay,
you
well,
on Sunday?
yeah, I guess so.
Okay, okay.
Right.
Hatzlacha
Thank you,
Good
Daniel.
Shabbos.
Good showers.
All right.
Wow.
Thank God.